is the Associate State Director of Outreach for AARP Georgia, and I want to welcome you to this very important health and wellness discussion. AARP was founded in 1958 by our founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus. As a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, AARP has been working to promote health and wellness and well-being for older Americans for more than 60 years and is leading a revolution in the way that people view and live life after the age of 50. AARP's vision is a society in which all people, I repeat, all people live with dignity and purpose and fulfill their goals and dreams. Our moderator today is Garrett Davis, the CEO and founder of G. Davis Productions. Garrett's mission is to educate and advocate through laughter and the performing arts. His plays, just to name a few: Mama's Girls, which is on diabetes; Daddy's Boys on prostate cancer; Sisters at heart disease; and Forget Me Not, which is about Alzheimer's. These bodies of work impact the way that we learn, feel, and think about health, not to mention they also help us to begin a very important but uncomfortable conversations with our loved ones. If you have questions today, be sure to place your questions in the chat. And without further ado, I present to you our moderator for today's discussion, Garrett Davis. Good morning, Garrett.
Thank you, Gio. It's always a pleasure to be working alongside AARP. I was reflecting the other day, I've been working alongside AARP since 2012. So it has been definitely a journey, and the relationship that we have built over the years between our companies. You are definitely a gem. You're right there on top, and we look at you as a sister. We don't look at you and AARP as a partner. We kind of look at you guys as just family. And the work that we've been able to do together over the years really, really means a lot. And this Living With series that AARP has been presenting to the Georgia area and surrounding area, we really, really appreciate all the work that has gone in, and those that are looking today, we hope that you will, you still got time to send the link out and get your family and friends on this discussion that we're going to be talking about diabetes today. And, the last time that, we were together, we had a set of twins, Kimberly, Ketter, and Shaun Rivers, and we had those twins. It was such a great discussion. The hour went by so quick. And so we invited them back. And the story behind these two ladies is that when I originally met them, it was all about getting them to work with me on Mama's Girls, dealing with caregiving and diabetes, not knowing that they had a bout with heart disease. And we found all about that the last time we were together back in October. So if you don't know who they are, I want you to watch this short video. And when we come back, I'm going to have Kimberly, Ketter, and Shaun Rivers, and we're going to start our discussion on diabetes on Living With, brought to you by AARP Georgia. So let's go to the video.
My name is Kimberly Ketter. I'm a heart failure survivor of 8 years. Although statistics said that many don't survive past 5, I'm here 8 years later feeling great. My name is Shaun Rivers, and I'm an identical twin. And when we were diagnosed at age 40, my twin sister was actually diagnosed with heart failure first. And Shaun got diagnosed about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. And I remember we were sitting at the kitchen table. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and we both looked and said, there's got to be a reason for this. But at the very least, we got each other, There's hardly ever a time in our life where we weren't together, hardly ever. Yeah. So that's why we kind of joke about having heart failure. I mean, we've done everything together, became nurses together, we worked together, play together. So heart failure together, why not? No. Okay, we could do that too. We've been close our entire lives. We've been very close. And Shaun will always say, we take this twin thing to a whole nother level. You really didn't have to get it, No, that's taking this a bit far. But it's okay, because, when you're hurting, there's only a few people that you can really call at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I, call my sisters, like, my ankles are swollen. Take your laces, go back to bed. And go to bed. Go sleep. I got to get up and go to work in the morning. We got clinic to run. but we're each other's strength, and very rarely are we both down at the same time, which is fortunate. So when I'm down, she's like, get up, come on, let's go, and vice versa. So that helps. She and I own a diabetes wellness center. We opened in Petersburg about 1.5 years ago. It's always been our passion for health education and to teach the least of these, those who usually don't have access to care and don't have access to many things. Nobody should be going through this by themselves. Do you have a close friend? Are you close to your mother? Are you close to your sister? Who is that person that you call? Have you talked to them about it? And we try and encourage those relationships, because surely we can't be everywhere. I always use this hashtag, live, love, and dance, and that's exactly what we're doing. And we're gonna run this race until the wheels fall off. So face it, deal with it, and fight it with everything you got. That's right. And like my sister says, we have heart failure, but it doesn't have us. Together, we rise above heart failure.
Every time I see that video, I get emotional, because I think of, if you just take a time, all the things that are taking place in the world today. And if you look at the African-American female who has to sometimes be the mother and the father in the home, you look at the African-American female who sometimes has to work twice as hard and get paid twice as less. You look at the African-American female who does so much, and then on top of that have to deal with taking care of kids, being the wife, being the mother, being the aunt, being the caregiver, working 2 jobs, and having to deal with your own personal health on top of that. Man, that's a lot. And these 2 ladies who, I know we're talking about diabetes, but when the diagnosis came down with heart failure at 40, that was something they pushed through. And here we are today, years later. They're still doing their thing. And I want to bring to the screen Kimberly, Ketter, and Shaun Rivers. Guys, I appreciate you guys so much. You guys are like my sisters now. Just like my relationship with AARP. We're not clients. And, we're like family. And you guys give me inspiration and makes me want to work harder, so that the world can know your story, because I don't want you two to be the world's best kept secret. I want the world to know about you two, because as the world knows about you, I think little girls, grown-ups are inspired to be the CEO of their what?
Of their healthcare. That's right.
Of their healthcare. So today, we're glad to have you guys back, but today's discussion is about diabetes. So let's start. Kimberly, how did you, before you got into owning a diabetes clinic, how did that, why the interest in diabetes?
It was birthed many years ago. Part of my experience as a nurse was working at the Veterans Hospital here in Richmond. And one of the positions that I held was as a case manager or health case manager. And one of my primary focuses was on diabetes management and education. And I really enjoyed that, because I'm the type of person that I have to see a problem and I have to find a solution and I have to fix it in that order. And diabetes is one of those things that absolutely can be prevented. It can be fixed, or at least managed really well. After working there for about 1.5 years in that particular position, it just dawned on me. I said, wow, if this population of patients, meaning the veteran population, is overwhelmed with diabetes and not having the information, I can't imagine what my village is going through outside of these walls. So just prayed about that and, just listened to God, real spiritual person, and were called to move out of that environment into the village, into the community, to help folk who don't have resources and people who really don't have access to care or access to diabetes education. So it was a move of God. It was certainly a calling that I struggled with for a while, truth be told, because, even now, a lot of people will say, you left your good government job, on a whim just to go and open up your own clinic, not guaranteed this and that. I said, Yeah, we kind of did. So I wouldn't change my journey at all, not at all.
Now, Shaun, before you got into diabetes, the clinic with your sister, we're going to get into all that because there's a lot of stuff I got to unpack that Kim just said. But Shaun, with you, how did your journey with diabetes get started?
My journey was a little bit different. Most of my career, it was also at the Veterans Hospital, but I worked in the surgical clinic. But where I saw a lot of my patients with diabetes was in the vascular surgery clinic. So where I caught a lot of my folks with diabetes was on the other end of the spectrum, where their diabetes was so uncontrolled for so long. We caught them on the end where the only solution was to amputate, or they had these really bad wounds that would never heal, and they were coming to us for us to clean the wound or to do wound management for them. So with myself looking at from that lens, if we had done prevention, or if they had used some preventive measures years ago, we could have not seen this patient in this capacity. So that was me looking at diabetes through that lens.
Wow. So Kim, let's just dive into this a little bit. What are the warning signs that, I'm sitting at home, I'm on the couch, I love Twinkies and I love Coke or whatever the case may be. What are the warning signs? What are the warning signs for diabetes?
Well, diabetes is one of those things, it can kind of sneak up on you. And for most of my patients, even with their experience and talking with them, it's not something like flipping a switch. It doesn't happen overnight. It kind of creeps up over time. Some of the major warning signs that something may be going on in terms of diabetes is extreme thirst. You're thirsty. You can't get enough to drink. Fatigue is another one. Urinating a lot. And what a lot of patients will describe is my urine actually looks like water. It's so dilute. So those are some of the major ones. Thirsty all the time, tired all the time, urinating all the time, and can't get enough to eat. We also see folks who complain of having blurry vision. They go to, and a lot of diabetes is actually found at the ophthalmologist's office, because they'll complain they can't see really well. I just had these glasses for 6 months. I shouldn't need a change of prescription. So they go back to their eye doctor, and the eye doctor can look in the eye and actually make a determination. Yeah, you might need to check with your primary to see if you have diabetes. So blurry vision is another big one. But wounds that don't heal is another one. Usually our bodies are well equipped to handle wounds with no problem, but it should not take 2 weeks for a scratch or, a bruise to heal. It just shouldn't take that long. So we start getting concerned when we see those things, or if a patient comes in complaining of those things. Usually what gets folks to the doctor is the urination part. The urination and the fatigue, especially at night. They complain of not being able to sleep because they're up all night urinating. So it's a combination of those. It's not necessarily exclusive to one or two of those, but in a big bucket, those are generally what we see in folks who we get concerned about having diabetes.
And I guess those are also areas that we could easily overlook and not pay attention to over a long period of time. And I guess when it goes undetected for a long period of time, that's when we get in a danger zone.
Yeah, and the problem is with some of our patients too, is if they're on fluid pills and things like that for other reasons, like heart failure, well, it doesn't matter if you're going to the bathroom all night, because that's what the fluid pills do. That's what they're supposed to do. So that can be completely overlooked. Whereas in a person who's not taking that, that's an abnormal finding. And folks who take diuretics, it's every day. So those are some of the things that we actually might miss.
Right. So Shaun, as I listened to your sister talk about, how things are easily overlooked, if I'm, everyone who's looking at this and listening to this, I want them to understand that you have to pay attention to your body. And you just can't always just overlook as though, okay, well, I'm on this pill, that's what's making me go to the bathroom. I mean, you really have to pay attention to your body. So Shaun, how, like having a diabetes clinic, what are some of the things that, I don't want to say stories, but what are some of the incidents that people come in talking about that they just overlooked?
Well, the urination part is one of the big ones. Some of the stories that we get, they with diabetes, they often get caught in this vicious cycle as for instance, when they say that they're thirsty all the time, well, the urination kind of gets caught in that vicious cycle because they're drinking a lot of water. And they say, well, of course I'm going to the bathroom all the time because I'm drinking all of this water. But they don't realize that that's part of the diabetes cycle, that they're going to the bathroom all the time because they're thirsty all the time. Now they're drinking all this water to flush out the sugar. So now they're caught in this vicious cycle, but they don't realize that that's part of the problem. So we have to kind of go into the dynamics of the diabetes. So that's one of the big things.
When you go to the doctor, what are some of the things that you should ask your doctor, or in terms of diabetes? Is there something that you can be checked for? I mean, what do you say to your doctor when you say, I want to be checked for diabetes? I mean, give them some exact words to use.
Well, when they go to the doctor, what they can do is ask for a blood test. There's one test in particular, it's called the A1C, that they can ask for, especially if it runs in their family. And what the A1C test is it's a blood test, and it sort of gives us a snapshot. It's like an average of what their blood sugars have been doing going back 3 months. It's like an average. So they'll do that, and a normal A1C is going to be less than 5.7. So if you get to 5.7 to 6.4, that sort of puts you in the pre-diabetes range. If you get over 6.5, that gives you a diagnosis of diabetes. So that's a pretty good marker of what your sugars have been doing going back 3 months. So that's one good test that we do. Any blood sugar, when they do your regular blood sugar in your routine labs, any sugar over 200 is an automatic diagnosis of diabetes. You should never have a routine random blood sugar over 200. That's an automatic diagnosis of diabetes. So those are two pretty good markers.
So, Shaun, I'm going to ask you to give those numbers again, because I mean, I know we're listening and we're, some of me trying to take notes. So give those numbers again in terms of the A1C or AC1 and the blood sugar. Give those numbers again.
Okay, so your A1C, of course, again, is your average. It'll give you an average or a snapshot of what your blood sugars have been doing going back 3 months. So a normal A1C is going to be less than 5.7. When you get to 5.7 to 6.4, that's going to put you into what they call the pre-diabetes range. When you get over to 6.5 or higher, that gives you a diagnosis of diabetes.
Okay.
A random blood test of 200 or higher is automatically going to give you a diagnosis of diabetes.
Okay. So Kimberly, I've heard people say, I went to the doctor and the doctor said I was pre-diabetic. Kind of explain to people, what does pre-diabetic mean? Because, in our work, when we was putting together Mama's Girls Part 2, Sugar Ain't Sweet, because in the African-American community, they don't say diabetes, they say I got sugar.
That's right.
But, that's not always good. But, diabetes is one of those things that I've heard one person say, because, I have diabetes, but, I don't feel like there's nothing wrong with me until I have an episode or something like that. So I ignore it. So let's kind of get into, the pre-diabetic, what does that mean? If you go to the doctor and the doctor says you're pre-diabetic, what exactly does that mean?
So pre-diabetes means that you have elevated blood sugars, but not quite high enough for us to call it diabetes officially. So you have an elevated blood sugar, but it's not officially diabetic range. The problem I have with that is, and I tell my patients, is that when most of my patients say, well, I'm pre-diabetic or I'm borderline diabetic, they have a tendency to ignore it because they don't have diabetes yet. It's not an official diagnosis. So the way Shaun and I teach is it's like being a little pregnant. You either are pregnant or you're not pregnant. You either have diabetes or you don't. Now, please don't misunderstand. There is absolutely a term and a range for prediabetes, but the way that we approach it is that if we can prevent you from flipping completely into the diabetes range, we'd much rather do that. So we're really tough on our patients who come to us as pre-diabetic, because we're really in the trenches now to prevent diabetes from happening in the first place. So our patients, they'll fuss at us and they'll say, why do I have diabetes? Why do I have to do all of that? I said, that's precisely our point. You don't want diabetes, but your blood sugars are now indicating that you're headed in that direction. So why not pull it back now? Let's make these lifestyle changes and let's get on top of this now so it doesn't flip. So again, pre-diabetes is absolutely a term. Please don't misunderstand. But from a teaching standpoint, we teach as though they have it. And we approach the patient as though they have diabetes just diagnosed. And we're really diligent about it so that we can turn them around and get going in the other direction.
Kim, what's the hardest thing for a person that you've experienced who's been diagnosed with pre-diabetes? What's the hardest thing for them to get a grasp of, for those that fall into full-blown diabetes after they've been diagnosed? What do you think the reason was?
I think a lot of it is just straight denial. You know, there's a lot in our culture that around diabetes, and it's been in our culture for a long time, but we never talk about it. You know, great grandma used to know that she had syringes, you know, tucked in her drawer, never knew what they were for. Or I've always been told that she had the sugar, or grandma had her leg cut off, you know, we don't know why, that kind of thing. So it's always been there. One of the toughest things for us to battle is that type of thing, you know, this information or misinformation that's been in our cultures for a long time. So we have to dismantle that and start. It's almost like rebooting a computer. So we got to turn the computer off and start with a whole new system. Be like, no, this isn't true. That's not true. No, the insulin didn't give you diabetes. No, the insulin didn't cause you to have your leg cut off. It's the fact that you were uncontrolled for 15 years that probably got us here. So the other piece of that that's really difficult for our patients is the diet changes. Because for a long time, we've been told, or pointing our fingers, you can't have X, Y, and Z ever again in your whole life. And that's not true at all. It's not what we eat all the time that gets us in trouble, although it's very important. It's the amounts of certain foods that we eat and the time of day that we eat certain things that can get us in trouble. So those are important points that we try, because patients like balance. You know, and you're not going to get anywhere with a patient if all you're saying every time they come to your clinic appointment, give it up, stop doing this, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that. Sometimes we have to compromise, and Shaun and I are pretty good at coming in the middle. You know, if you want your grandkids' piece of cake, I'm not upset with that. Have cake, not cake, and take the icing off. Eat it at your most active point of the day. You know, so it's things like that.
Unpack. This is interesting to me. You said a certain time of day that you eat. That unpack that. What do you mean by that?
So some of our patients, particularly the ones who are already diagnosed with diabetes, one of the things that we ask them to, well, two things we ask them to do is keep meal journals for us, write down everything they eat and drink, the time of day, the amount that they had and when they had it, and blood sugar logs. So they're checking their blood sugars. And what we do is when they come for our appointments, we look at those two things together, because it helps us to discern where the problem is. So, for example, if a patient comes in and their blood sugars fasting in the morning, now for a patient who has diabetes, we like fasting blood sugars, meaning nothing to eat or drink for 8 hours or greater. It should be less than 120 for us. For a diabetic patient, we like less than 120. So let's say they come to us and they have a fasting blood sugar of 160, which is above where we want it to be. So my first question is, did you take your medicine? I say, yeah, I took my medicine. My next question is, what did you eat last night? Because what your fasting blood sugars are in the morning directly reflect what happened the night before. So when I look at their meal journal, I'll say, oh, you had mashed potatoes and you had macaroni and cheese and you had a sandwich. Carb overload, right? So what I would tell them, and they had cake. So one of my things is certainly we got to back that off, because when you're eating those things real heavy late in the day, your body can't burn it. Your metabolism is on a bell curve. So it starts kind of lagging off at the end of your day. So you're not burning as well. So if you load up on all those carbs at the end of your day, then your body stores it, and it stores it as fat, and it stores it as sugar. So when you wake up the next morning, your fasting blood sugars are elevated because your body simply couldn't do anything with it overnight. So it's placement of your high carbs. If you like snacks, if you like cake, have it before you go run your mile, or have it before you do your 30-minute walk. So you get what you want, I get what I want, because you're going to burn those calories and those carbs off with your exercise. So it's important, but it takes some doing.
Wow. Okay, that was great. I appreciate that. Shaun, so you guys run a diabetes wellness clinic. So explain to me, why is a diabetes wellness clinic important in a community like Petersburg?
We have so many patients that have come to that we see in our clinic that have had diabetes for many, many years and have never been controlled. And actually, a lot of our patients have had some type of diabetes education in the past. But there's something to be said about the classes and the diabetes education being culturally sensitive. We have to meet the patients that we serve where they are. And just to kind of piggyback off of what Kim said, we as a culture, we sort of been taught, as far as our eating and how we eat over the years, that I know we have, and I know many of the folks watching have been taught, you eat what you've been put on your plate. You can't get up from the table until you've completed everything off of your plate. There's starving people in Africa, starving people in China. You have to finish all of your food, and you can't get up until you eat it all. We've been taught these things. We've been taught to overeat and not stop eating when you're full. So like Kim said, that there's some things that we have to really unwrap. So getting back to your question, is so important. Kim and I really wanted to go to Petersburg because it's a really underserved community. We are the only diabetes certified center, I think, within a 20-mile radius of where we are. And we pride ourselves in that because we get folks of all walks of life. Majority of the people that we serve look like us, and low income folks in the area, and we're able to teach on a level that they can understand. And the majority of the people who that come to our area are able to get that information and able to take it back to their families. We teach it in a holistic way. We teach our patients in a family oriented type of a setting. It's like when you're having that conversation with your family at the kitchen table. It's sort of how our class is. Is the way that we approach our classes.
Great. So Kim, back to you now. One of the things that I think people have to realize is that it's not the end of the world if you're diagnosed with diabetes. They didn't say that you had terminal cancer. You've been diagnosed with diabetes. So Kim, it's a change of lifestyle. It's living with versus, one of the things, we learn to say, we tell people, you're living with diabetes. I'm not a diabetic. I'm living with diabetes. So Kim, let's talk about the lifestyle. What are the changes that a person who's been diagnosed with diabetes, what are the changes that they now have to go through or start looking at?
So the changes that we recommend first is admitting that there's an issue in the first place. Mm-hmm. Again, one of the things that's killing our communities is denial. I don't have diabetes, or I'm not claiming that. The population that we serve are also very spiritual. They go to church. We're right in the middle of African American community. There's a church on every corner. Folk go to Bible study. And they share this information. But one of the first things that we do is we have to tackle that denial piece. And what we share with our patients is this, especially for our patients who are spiritual and into the church, because they'll say, I'm not claiming that, Miss Kim. God is going to heal me, and I'm just not claiming that. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to claim that. My response to that is, first, I find out where they are, because you never want to assume that patients are spiritually where you are or believe the same things that you do. So you have to be cautious, culturally sensitive, right? Find out where your patient is. So once I find that out, I'm going in. So my example for them is this. I said, it sounds like you're a Bible reader, ma'am. So listen, just hear me out. So you know the story about when Jesus went and he found this guy who was filled with demons. He was possessed with demons, and he was, running amok, acting crazy, just doing his thing, right? I said, but they were asking God if he could be healed. Before he could heal them, he asked this person what his name was. And the guy that was possessed said, "My name is Legion, for I am many." He asked his name first. Then he said Legion, and then he called the demons to come out. All that to say is you have to call the disease or the compromise what it is before you can be healed. You must be able to acknowledge that this is an issue right in front of you, and then you go heal it. So when I tell them that, they're like,
Oh,
he said, "Well, Miss Kim, you go to church, huh?" "Yes, ma'am, I do. Yes, I do." But that starts the conversation. So once we get past the denial piece, the rest of it kind of falls into place, because then they're going to ask, okay, what do I need to do? So, okay, now we need to look at your diet. We need to limit carbohydrates. That's the big thing. Carbohydrates are the number one driver of diabetes. And it's everything that pretty much any grain, any cereal, pasta, rice, beans, anything made with sugar, flour, or corn, anything made from those things is probably a carbohydrate. It doesn't mean that you can't have them. It just means that we have to be mindful about the type, because they're good and bad, and the amounts that we have and the time of day. So it's the meal planning, and we got to get moving. It's really difficult during COVID to do that. Folk are in the gym, people are afraid to go outside and even exercise now. So we have to be a bit creative as to how we teach people to be active. So, Shaun and I will tell people, turn on your cable TV to the music station, get you some hand weights, get you a stair step, and you just dance up and down that stair step with the weights in your hand through 6 songs. If you do it from 6 songs, you got close to 30 minutes of exercise. Yeah. So there are ways that it can be done. We just need to be creative. So getting rid of denial, diet, meal planning, and exercise are probably the most pertinent things, in addition to medication management if it's necessary.
Right. One of the things I like about AARP is the fact that they make programs like this available for free, because at the end of the day, education is very key to understanding what you're going through. And AARP offers, a plethora of programs. I'm sure you can go on their website and see things like this. So Jill, I kind of want to bring you in for a minute. And I kind of wanted to ask Jill, when it comes to, AARP, I put them on a high pedestal, but in terms of if there's a church or there's a civic group or there's an organization looking for a cause, they said, well, you know what, we want to tackle diabetes. How can they partner with AARP to do something on diabetes in their community where they're going to reach a lot of people? Because sometimes they think, well, our organization only got 10 people, we can't do anything, but they shouldn't look at it like that, right?
Absolutely not. AARP, we have our caregiving workshops that we do. Before the pandemic, we would go out to churches. We have a specific caregiving toolkit, is African American caregiving toolkit that reaches out, that allows us to help pastors to reach their congregations. But we also have our normal preparative care guide that's for everyone. And so now that we are unfortunately, in this position of the pandemic where we are social distancing ourselves, and we are able, I would say that if there's any good thing come out of this all, is that we are able to have a broader reach, right? So we are able to meet people where they are, no matter where you are. Just last weekend, we had someone log in from Germany. There was a U.S. citizen on a military base that wanted some information. So we're able to do a broader reach right now. And that's one of the great things with this particular type of platform that we're on today. And so we're able to do these workshops with churches, with schools, veteran organizations or homeschooling groups or whatever type of organization you're in, and you need that information to help, whether it's a family member or just friends. We are able to do these for free. And
Yeah.
our programming is free of charge to members and to the community.
Yeah. So coming up December the 1st, our next Living With is going to be about veterans. And one of the things that stuck out, the twins didn't know this, Jill, but in their opening comments, they was talking about, I think it was Shaun was talking about with the VA and the military and all of that. And so we do want our military to know that AARP is a resource and a pathway to find out all this information that you need to know that can help you through your daily grind. We got a question coming from one of the listeners and viewers. The question is, what about self-testing at home and what those numbers are? So when I self-test at home, what do my numbers indicate? This is not the same as A1C test, correct? So that's coming from C. Anderson. So Kim or Shaun, if you would answer that.
When you're testing at home, of course, you're using, your self-monitor, whatever your meter is. So I think Kim sort of alluded to some of those numbers previously, but you're fasting. Of course, your fasting blood sugars is nothing to eat or drink for about 8 hours or more. And so they should be between 90 and about 130. For better control, it should be between 90 and 120 with no food or drink. So that's what your fasting blood sugar should look like with no food or drink on board. What we call postprandial, or 2 hours after you've consumed food, you shouldn't have any blood sugars over 180. So that's according to the American Diabetes Association standards of care. So your postprandial or 2 hour post meal should be less than 180. So those are your markers that you should be looking for good diabetes control. And just about any meter that you use should be a good gauge for giving you your numbers. And just to kind of put a little pin in there, there's some really good devices without kind of naming any, but it depends on how often you check your sugars. If you're checking more often, there are some that are some scan devices, some of them that you kind of see on TV, so you don't have to stick your fingers more often. So I'll put that plug there so you don't have to keep, getting that pain in your fingers. So there's some that you could put the little device on your arm and do a scan. So that might be something that you can look into if you're sticking 3 to 4 times a day, so you can continue to get your checks more often.
And guys, those that are watching and listening, it's not often that AARP has made it possible to have two expert professionals that deal with diabetes, to your disposal. So, I implore you to please, if you've got a question, put it in the chat comment, and just like, that question just answered, we'll do our best to make sure that, your concerns get heard. If you don't take advantage of opportunities like this, then they're pretty much in vain. So please, if you've got questions concerning anything dealing with diabetes, go ahead and put it into the chat, and we'll see if we can get those answered. Kimberly, in terms of, portion sizes, I know American Diabetes Association, they got a plate that's set up in portions, and you can, how important is portion sizes when it comes to diabetes, and also go into what should you eat or what can't you eat?
It is vital. One of the things that we instruct our patients, there are 2 ways that we instruct our patients to manage their meals. One is by using the plate method that you mentioned, and simply using the plate method means that you divide your plate into 3 sections. So you divide your plate in half, and then the other 1/2 you divide it again. So you have 2 quarters, and then you have half of a plate. Half of your plate should be your non-starchy vegetables. So those are your green beans, your broccoli, your kale, your spinach, your cauliflower, things like that. Very little carbohydrate count, very small effect on blood sugars. They're high in fiber. They have a lot of vitamins and minerals that are essential, and they make you feel full. So the more fiber something has, the less you have a tendency to eat. So we recommend that. And I don't know too many people that eat vegetables for breakfast, although you could, because breakfast, we have a misconception about breakfast. Breakfast just means you're breaking your fast. It never said that you have to have pancakes and sausage and breakfast food. It never said that. You're breaking your fast from overnight. So if you want that piece of grilled chicken and leftover broccoli from the night before for breakfast, have chicken and broccoli for breakfast. It's totally fine. It's whatever you feel like eating, but you got to get that half a plate in of those non-starchy vegetables. Okay. 1/4 of your plate should be your protein. And they used to say the protein should be fit in the palm of your hand. And I tell my patients, it's your hand, not your 6'5" husband's hand, which is probably bigger than yours. That does not count. It's your hand. It should fit in there. And that's going to be lean. That's your fish, your beef, anything like that, grilled, baked, or broiled, always better. Am I saying that you can never have a piece of fried fish again in your whole life? I'm not saying that, but there are ways that we can do it better. Air fryers are very good because you're not submerging it in grease and oil. And you can choose then what you're coating the fish with. So you can choose coatings that are higher in fiber, for example. I know some people who mix in some flaxseed, which will help their cholesterol. So there are a lot of things that you can do to make those things healthier. The other 1/4 of your plate is what gets people in most trouble, and that's the carbohydrate. And again, carbohydrate is any starch, any grain, any bread, pasta, rice, anything made from flour, corn, or sugar. Any juice, any fruit is carbohydrate. Generally, using the plate method, I tell my patients to limit your carbs to 1 or 2 servings of a carbohydrate with every meal. And I mean serving size. Now, the serving size, you're going to get a lot of moving around on that one because it varies. So that's when we start encouraging how to read a nutrition label. And that's a whole nother entity. It's like, no, your serving size is not the whole container. Your serving size is maybe half a cup. But I did, while I'm on that, kind of in that vein, I did want to address one of the questions that was in the chat for Mr. Lewis in terms of recommending, do we recommend if we stop eating a certain part of the day? And the answer is yes. We usually tell our patients no big meals after 7. Cut it off at 7, because remember what I said earlier, your body's metabolism is on a bell curve. So around 7 o'clock, that metabolism is starting to slow down. So if you throw a whole big meal at it at 9 o'clock at night and you're in the bed by 11, your body can't do a thing with that. It's going to store it though, and it stores it as sugar, it stores it as fat. So no large meals after 7. Now, if you want a snack after 7, you can do that, but focus on protein then. Get you a handful of walnuts. It won't affect your blood sugar. Get you some raw vegetables and a little bit of dip. Won't affect your blood sugar. But cookies and cake and chips and that kind of stuff will jack your blood sugar up. Your body's going to store it. Blood sugars are going to be tore up in the morning. So those are just some basic things. Yeah.
Dr. Agarwal from Rush Medical Center, we would speak together sometimes. She would always put some color on your plate.
That's right.
You know, if everything is brown and dark brown, color, like the fruits and the vegetables, put some color on your plate. Wow, that's amazing. Going back to when you said breakfast, I mean, now I know where the word breakfast comes from. You're breaking the fast. That's amazing. I learned that. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I always tell my patients when they're doing when they're talking about their service size, I always sort of use this analogy because they always get it. And I always ask them if they buy silverware sets. And they say, yeah, sure, we buy silverware sets. And they kind of go through what's in the silverware set. They say, yeah, it's the fork, it's the knife, it's the spoon. And then there's these other 2 utensils that no one ever uses. They always stay in the drawer. It's the serving fork. It's always in the drawer. They said, yeah. I said, well, what do you always use to serve your food? And there's a pause in the room. And I said, I already know, because you always use that big spoon hanging on the screw behind the stove with the holes in it. And the class erupts in laughter because that's the one they use. But when you use that spoon to serve yourself, you're serving yourself too much food. Because when you scoop it once and you scoop it twice, you served yourself enough for 2 people instead of 1. So it's how much and what you're serving yourself with. And that plate method, when you're using your plate, should only be about 9 inches around. So when you're getting those real big fancy plates that we buy from Target, they're way bigger than the 9 inches. So when we shrink what we're serving our food on, we're more apt to not put as much food on the plate. So there's a lot of ways that we can, serve ourselves different and look at how we're getting our portions down. It's how we're serving our food.
So we talk about lifestyle. For instance, like myself, and I know I got some bad eating habits. I'm just going to put it out there and you guys can help me. So, I'm not a breakfast guy. I've been told breakfast is the most important part of the day, but I only do breakfast on the weekends if I got company. And I work, and I'm like, you know what? I haven't eaten anything today. I know that's not good. How many times should a person eat a day? So if we're listening to you and we got these bad habits, what's some of the things that we need to start? What are the basic things we need to start doing? So how many times should a person eat a day?
Well,
You know,
it can vary. It can vary, and it really depends on an individual. There are some patients who say, "Well, I do my breakfast, lunch, and dinner," and that's pretty standard stuff. For some of my diabetic patients, that's not the best way to do it for them. It's better for them to graze or to eat 5 small meals throughout the day so that they don't see blood sugar spikes. So that's something that we manage on an individual basis through meal planning, is to determine how often they should be eating based on their blood sugar readings, what their lifestyle is like. And to your point, Garrett, skipping breakfast is a big no-no. Coffee does not constitute breakfast either, by the way. I'm just saying. And the reason for that is I teach it this way. If you treat your body like a coal burning furnace, when you crank on the furnace, if you don't put coal in the furnace, what happens to the fire? It goes out. So you're not going to burn anything if the fire is gone. It's a way of jump starting your metabolism in the morning. Now, it doesn't mean that you jump start it with a truckload of coal or like a stack of pancakes and half a slab of bacon and all of that. You just have to get something in there to start the engine. And then once you start the engine, your metabolism is like, oh, okay, she's feeding me today, so let me go ahead and burn this. So that's important. It's important.
Okay. What was you gonna say, Shaun?
oh, she answered it. That's what I was going to say. Yes, liking it to the coal in the engine. That's right.
Yep.
So with running a diabetes clinic, I want to make, we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I want to again encourage people, if you got questions, to ask, and I'm going to try to put myself in the space of those that are watching and listening. What are the biggest fears that people have when they find out they have diabetes? And it's okay to have fears, guys. It's okay to be afraid, but that's why programs like this today that AARP is making possible, and having Kimberly and Shaun on, you combat fears with education and with knowledge. But Kim and Shaun, what are some of the fears that people have when they come into your clinic?
One of the biggest fears, and I'll go back to one of the patients that I had, was insulin. That's one of the biggest fears. And I think Kim sort of alluded to that, because of a lot of misconceptions that patients have about insulin. I don't want to go on insulin because I saw my grandmother on insulin, and as soon as she started insulin, they cut off her leg. Or, I hate needles. And, as soon as I'm on insulin, I know I'm at the end of my road for insulin. Once you go on insulin, then, my diabetes is at its worst. So we have to sort of unravel a lot of these misconceptions on the first visit that they're there. I actually had a patient that was referred to us. He really needed insulin, and actually he tells his story all the time. He needed a heart transplant. Mm-hmm. And in order for him to get the heart transplant, he was referred to us to get his diabetes under control. And they wouldn't even put him on the list, but he needed insulin to do that. But he was outright refusing insulin. And so all the doctors, he had it out with all these doctors. So the last sort of hurrah was for us to try to work with this guy. So he came to us. But before we could really push insulin, we had to find out what his fears were of insulin. So by the time we sort of worked with this guy, we found out some of his history, which was, there was drug abuse history in his family. He saw family members who OD'd with the needles. So that was the fear of insulin. So we had to introduce not the syringe with the vial, but we introduced the insulin with the pen. So after we went through all of this, he gave his first insulin injection in our office, and he went on that next year to receive his transplant. Wow. So it's not enough to label these patients non-compliant. You have to unwrap the whole patient and why they have these fears, and unwrap these misconceptions with these patients to help them be able to navigate the system and navigate their fears. There's a part of our class that we go through. We go through the whole grieving process with our patients when they come in. They can have diabetes education from somewhere else, but we go through the whole 5 stages of grief in one of our classes. And once we do, we go through Kim had mentioned that before. We go through denial, we go through the anger, we go through the depression, we go through the bargaining, and we go through the acceptance, because a lot of them realize they go through the stages, but they don't realize that that's what's going on. But when we apply that to these patients going through a chronic disease, it makes sense to them.
Right.
So we have to treat the whole body when they're dealing with these diabetes illnesses. So it makes sense to them after that.
Good. Kimberly, before we get into, the elephant in the room, we're going to talk about amputations. But before that, Kim, if you could take that next question that one of our viewers got up, how can we, if you could do that with my annual doctor visit until it was high enough for me to go into Metaforum. I am still angry. How can we make sure we have this discussion early when the A1C is 6.0 rather than 7.0?
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That drives us crazy. And that's one of the reasons why we exist in the form that we exist. Prevention, prevention is everything. And again, like I said earlier, in our clinic, and the physicians that actually refer to us will refer them as pre-diabetic for that reason, because they know we're going to be tough on them at an A1C of 5.8. I'm not going to wait until your A1C is 9. One of the things that you can do as a patient, and we alluded to this earlier too, is to be the CEO of your healthcare. There are certain things that in an annual exam that you should be getting. One of the things that they're doing now is that they are screening folk for diabetes using that A1C. So it's not just something that we use if we kind of think you have diabetes or if you have symptoms. It's a screening that we should be getting every year, at least annually. And what we're trying to get a lot more providers to understand is that when you see that A1C of 5.8, red flags and sirens should be going off all over the place. Why do we want to wait? And what most of our patients will share with us and what they get is, don't worry about it right now. You don't have diabetes. Right. It's like they're afraid just to be straight up honest. I'd rather you shoot from the hip with me and be honest with me. Let me know what I'm dealing with so we can do this together. But it's like they'll say, don't worry about it right now. You don't have diabetes. Just go out and walk a few days a week. Come back and see me in a year. Well, in a year, now your A1C is 8. So when it was 5.8, we could have said, come on, let's do this. Let's sit down. Let's refer you to a diabetes management, diabetes prevention program. Let's make some changes in diet. Let's be honest about weight loss. Obesity is not a bad word in our clinic, and it is in a lot of places. A lot of places will avoid saying that you're overweight or that you are obese for fear of offending. I don't have a fear of offending my patient because I'm trying to make them live. So if they understand, and you share it with love though, and concern, but with a blunt honesty. If we're not doing that, people are going to die. And there are people who are on medications who probably, if we had gotten this stuff earlier, don't need to be on this stuff. So it frustrates me. I'm sorry that happened to you, but it's something that we see really often. It happens a lot. So as a patient, you should be asking, if they take blood from you, you want to know what they did with it and not wait until they call you to get it. If you had blood work done in 2 weeks, if they have not called you, I'd be calling the office. I just want to talk to somebody about my labs. I'm concerned about how my kidneys are working. Are they okay? How's my A1C? What's my cholesterol look like? I have heart disease in my family. What's that look like? And it's not enough to just get numbers. What do they mean? What do they mean? Folk are quick to throw numbers at you, but it's futile if you don't know what that means. And it's not paired with things to do to change it. So my voice is coming up a little bit because that frustrates me. And that's what we're passionate about. We're passionate about that.
Good. So we've only got a few minutes left. So I want to kind of get into, before we bring Jill back out for closing comments. When you mentioned the word diabetes, you think amputations. And I think there's a misconception. They think diabetes is the reason I lost my leg, but that's not the reason you lost your leg. So if you could kind of go into let's go into amputation. What causes an amputation? I think a lot of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, comes into play when you don't do what you're supposed to do. And is a result of those things. So one of you could go into amputations, because that first thing you think about. I have a brother-in-law who's living with diabetes, and he said, "I have to be very careful. If I cut something, I got to be careful. If I stop my foot or something, I got to be extra careful." So we can kind of go into amputations. Let's talk about that.
Well, diabetes is a microvascular disease. And as Shaun alluded to earlier, we see so often in vascular clinics and things where she used to work, people just getting their limbs cut off. And because what I mean by microvascular is diabetes over time, it erodes the blood vessels, especially the small, tiny blood vessels in your body. And think about where those blood vessels are. They're in your heart, they're in your brain, they're in your kidneys, and they're in your lower extremities. So sugar over a period of time is almost like caustic acid going through them over a period of time. It starts eroding the insides of those blood vessels. And if it erodes the insides of the blood vessels, you now have pretty much like an open sore on the inside of those blood vessels. So now it's open, blood flows past it, the blood cells get stuck to it, now you got a clot. So now you got this clot that builds and builds. So now blood can't get to wherever it was going. So if that blood was trying to get to your pinky toe, for example, where they got the small blood vessels, and it can no longer get there, that part of your body will start to die because it's not getting blood, it's not getting oxygen, because the microvascular system has been compromised by uncontrolled diabetes. So if it can't get oxygen, it dies. And your body is amazing because it will begin to separate healthy from damaged. It will turn it black. It will turn it green. It will become infected and pussy to the point that you now have to take it off. And you have to take it off to actually save the rest of the body. So your body is amazing. Got to save the host. Yep. So that's what we have to do. And that doesn't happen overnight. It happens for long, extended periods of uncontrolled diabetes. And it just doesn't have to be that way. And one reason for amputations is uncontrolled diabetes. It's the number one reason why people get limbs amputated. It's the number one cause of renal failure. And second only or right there with hypertension. So if you look at it as a microvascular disease and think about where those small blood vessels are, it kind of makes sense why diabetics have heart disease more. They go blind more. They have strokes more. They're on dialysis more, and they lose their limbs more.
Wow. Time is never enough when we have you two on. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. You guys in the AARP family now. I'm sure Jill will attest. And this will be not the last time that we call on you to kind of help us educate our loved ones. So Jill, again, on behalf of G-Day Production Films and the twins, we want to thank AARP for another edition of Living With. Our next is going to be on December the 1st, and we'll be talking with veterans. We're looking forward to that. But, thank you so much, AARP and Jill, for making this possible.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim and Shaun. It's always a pleasure. And just want to thank everyone today for attending. You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you all. Want to thank everyone for attending today's discussion, again, on living with diabetes. This has been absolutely wonderful. And we are coining the phrase, be the CEO of your own healthcare.
That's right. You are the boss.
Love it. That's right.
So Garrett, I'm going to put, if we can put in the chat, we have a couple of events also coming up. One tomorrow, veteran virtual paint party.
Okay.
As well. So I'm going to put that as well as the links for the December 1st event. We can put that in the chat for us.
All right. So they are in the chat, guys. You can see those and get more information. And we'll see you again on December the 1st as we talk with veterans and health.
Have a good one.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.